What's up, guys? Nate and Sutton back again with another video, and today we are talking about standing up for what's right in a world full of wrong. It's a heavy hitter. We're coming at you, and you're probably going to come back at us, but that's all right.
So about this video, I was trying to come up with a topic for us to talk about, and I was praying about it. God, what do you want us to talk about? And I had this idea, like, I want to talk about body image because we've had so many people ask us about that on Instagram, just like how to view yourself the way God sees you, and how to have confidence and a good self-image. So that would be a good topic. So I told Nathaniel like all these ideas I had of what we were going to talk about. He thought it was good, and then we always listen to sermons online to try to hear other people speak about these things and what they have to say, get different perspectives. So I find a sermon, I'm listening to it, it's titled exactly what it would be to be talking about body image. Like, it may have even had that word in it, I don't know. And so I listened to the whole thing, I'm taking notes on it, and not one bit of it was about that. And so I get home and I tell Nathaniel, he's like, so how was the sermon? And I was like, I'm so annoyed, like I just took notes on this whole thing and it wasn't even about what I wanted to talk about. And I was like, wait a minute, it wasn't about what I wanted to talk about, but maybe this is what God wants us to talk about. And that's the feeling I was getting when I was listening to the video, because it was just so good and like powerful that I was like, this is a good thing to talk about. Like, this is what people need to hear.
Yeah. Today is definitely a different kind of video. It is one that we think is much needed in our world today. It's also one that's a little scary for us because I think we're going to get quite a bit of backlash for it. Which is okay, because that's what being a Christian is all about, is not going with the flow of society, but going with what God tells us to do and following after Jesus. And after all, he was rejected in this world more than anyone.
The biggest challenge for this generation today is, are you willing to be rejected? If someone comes up to you and holds a gun to your head and says, do you believe in Jesus? Yes or no? If you say yes, I'm going to shoot you. I think it's easy to say yes. Like, it's easy to die for Jesus. But what's hard is living for him and being rejected on a daily basis, and, people thinking that you're wrong and going against you, especially when we all like to be liked by other people. Unfortunately, we base people's value off of how many likes they get, how many followers they have, things like that, which is very silly.
There's a lot of really awesome things about Christianity, like loving people, treating people how you want to be treated, not lying, not stealing, staying faithful to your wife, your husband, stuff like that. A lot of like really awesome, virtuous things. But there's also sides of Christianity that really goes against the grain of culture that we're going to dive into some of those topics today. And that's what we're talking about, is that it's really hard to stand up in moments of when what the popular belief is, what most people think is the right thing, but a lot of times that goes directly against what God calls us to do and how to be. And that's tough. That is very difficult, especially with us. We have a platform. We're our YouTube channel has just been growing like crazy, and it's awesome that we're able to reach so many people around the world. But it can be easy to fall into the trap of like just wanting to put out videos, messages out there that people are, everyone's going to love.
And feel-good messages.
Yeah, the feel-good messages, which I think there is a time and place for that as well. But also, I think there's a time and place for standing up for the truth and what God says and how to live and how to be, regardless of the consequences. Whether that means we're going to get more thumbs down than more thumbs up, or we're going to have a bunch of people unsubscribe to our channel, whatever that means. That's who we are, and that's what we want this channel to be about. So that's what we're doing today, and that's what you can expect. So here we go. Let's go.
Jesus tells us in the Bible that if the world hates you, it's because they hated me first, speaking like Jesus. They hated him first.
All right, so we're going to use the book of Jeremiah as our reference point today, and I'm going to start off by reading this verse. That's really going to get us going here. So in Jeremiah 1:17 through 19, it says, Get yourself ready. Stand up and say to them whatever I command you. God is speaking to Jeremiah here. Do not be terrified by them, or I will terrify you before them. Today I have made you a fortified city, an iron pillar, and a bronze wall to stand up against the whole land, against the kings of Judah, its officials, its priests, and the people of the land. They will fight against you, but will not overcome you. For I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord.
That sounds like such a parent. It's like, don't cry, or I'm going to give you something to cry about.
Yeah, and essentially that's what he's saying to Jeremiah is, listen, I want you to stand up. You're going to stand up in front of all these people and tell them exactly what I tell you. Tell them my commands, and don't be afraid of them. Because if you're afraid of them and don't tell them what I tell you, I'm going to give you something to be afraid about. And we have that same choice today. Are we going to stand up in front of the world? Are we going to stand up for what's right, tell them what's right, regardless of their reactions? Or are we going to bow down and be afraid of them? Which kind of leads us into the main discussion for this video, which is there's three things that God told Jeremiah to talk about that you are sure to face a lot of rejection in our world today. The first thing that you will be rejected by in our world today is if you tell people that you're not a good person.
The message of the world right now is follow your heart. That we hear that all the time. That's what people say. But in the Bible, in Jeremiah 9, God is telling Jeremiah to destroy this city and destroy these people because all they're wanting to do is follow their hearts. And he says, but our hearts and our minds are evil. One thing that in our world today that is hard to stand up for or to talk about is abortion. That is like a no topic for people. We live in a world that calls killing babies something virtuous, like a woman's choice. And they say that if the baby's inside of you, it's okay to kill it. But as soon as it comes out, that's when it becomes wrong. So what if the baby's just like coming out and you stab it? Like, is that murder? Where do you draw the line of it being right and wrong?
Yeah, and we know that there's some of you watching this video that have killed your babies, and it's a very touchy subject. We don't have to talk about this, and we're not saying that there's not forgiveness there. There absolutely is forgiveness through Jesus and what he did. But it's so important that we recognize the commands of God, and if we break them, if we go against his design for our life, we have to ask God to forgive us for that. And that's what Jeremiah was telling the people, is that your heart is deceitful above all things. And that is why God destroyed the city in Jeremiah, is because people were following their own hearts and not obeying his commands. And that's the world that we live in today. Follow your heart.
The second thing that God tells Jeremiah to tell the people is that their religions are false and that their stone idols are foolish. And we think that's kind of funny, thinking about stone idols and worshiping a rock or a piece of wood or something like that. But a lot of us make up our own God in our head too. Like, oh, I think God would let me do this. I don't think he would be a God of punishment. I think he would give everlasting life, but not everlasting punishment. And you may have not carved that out into a piece of stone, but you did make that up. I mean, you made that up in your head. Because if you read the Bible, that is not who God is.
Yeah, I think there's like over 300 million idols in India. And we think that's crazy that like people are just worshiping, like she said, these just carved man-made images. But we do that all the time. People do that all the time with creating. I mean, like, where do you think that carved image came from? It came from someone's mind, someone's thoughts. And here in America, we may not put them into carved images, but it's still in our minds, the type of God that we're worshiping.
I think the main thing that people make up in their mind about God is kind of what I said of that he is not a God of punishment, but that is all in the Bible, like about his wrath and judgment and punishment. And there's a side of him that to be scared of. Mm-hmm. I know we all like to think about the loving side and the Father and everything like that, which is great. But you can't ignore that other side because that is still him.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we put off like, oh, well, that was God in the Old Testament. But, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if you look forward to Revelation, the things that are coming, it doesn't get any better. God is a God of love, but he is also a God of wrath and justice. Like in the book of Jeremiah, he was telling them to cry out to their man-made gods, their idols, on Judgment Day and see if they saved them. Yeah, so it's very important that we are worshiping the one and true living God, the one who created us, our Creator.
And to know him and to know the truth about him and who he is, because if you imagine what they're saying in Jeremiah, like on Judgment Day, who are you going to call out to? Are you going to call out to that God you made up in your head? Or are you going to call out to the one true God who will save you? Which is a scary thought for us. Like when I think of people making up gods in their head and not calling out, like, you know, they think they're a Christian, they think they're on the right path, but they're making up a God in their head that they're worshiping. It like scares me for you, whoever you are. Like, I want you to follow the right God. I want you to know him. I want you to be saved. And when the Judgment Day comes and he's, you know, who believes in me, I want you to be the one to be like, me, I know you.
You know, it's easy to forget the weight of eternity at the end of your life, standing before our Creator. And do you really know him? And does he really know you? It's the most important thing you could ever answer in your life. The third thing that God told Jeremiah to speak to the people, that we will for sure be rejected in today's world as well, if we talk about, is Judgment Day is coming. And it's not a very fun thing or attractive thing to talk about or even fun to think about.
There are a lot of pastors and leaders out there today preaching that there is no longer a hell, that was for the old times and that's not around anymore. But where does it say that in the Bible, that there is no longer a hell? I was listening to a pastor talk and he was talking about his friend who was preaching that same thing. And he asked him, where does it say that in the Bible? And his friend said, well, it's actually not in there, but it is a better story, right? And I was like, what? You're just like making up a story and preaching it to all these people that are listening to you and like believing in what you say?
Yeah, and at funerals, for example, everyone always says, well, they're in a better place. And while they might be, if they were saved, most of the time they're not. And it's just like this thing that we make up in our minds. But it's so important to have that right. Like, do you have that right? You can't objectively read through this book right here and tell me that there is no hell, that there's no punishment, no wrath. And you can't read through this book objectively and tell me that God wants homosexual relationships. You came up with these things. Our hearts come up with these things. And a lot of times it's because we don't want to be rejected, because we love people, we want to accept everyone, which in and of itself is not a bad thing, but when it trumps the commands of God, it is not a good thing.
Beyond wanting to love other people, we want to be loved. And so we don't want to tell people the truth a lot of the times. But there's got to come a time in your life where you just stop tiptoeing around things and just stand up for what's right. Because that's what Jeremiah did. That's what God told him to do. And I think that's what God's telling all of us to do. Just stand up for what's right.
If that means being rejected, well, you know, Jesus was rejected. He was crucified on a cross. He was whipped. That means sticking with Jesus. If being rejected means sticking with Jesus, well, that's what we're going to do. That's what we want to encourage all of you guys to do. And I just want to be clear that this is not a self-righteous thing or us coming to you saying, we're better than you, look at us, we're right, you're wrong. No, that's not what's going on at all here. Like in Jeremiah 9 verse 1, where he says he wishes his eyes were like a fountain because he could just cry all day because of his heart breaking for these people and knowing the judgment that they are going to receive from God, and that it kills him to think about. And that's the place that we're coming from. You know, we have not lived a perfect life. We are so far from perfect. We have done so many things wrong that we deserve judgment for. But the difference is that we recognize that, we turn from that, we ask God to forgive us for that, and we accept the sacrifice of Jesus taking our place, taking on the wrath of God so that we don't have to. And it's such a beautiful thing, and that's what we want for every one of you watching this. That's our true heart. Not to tell you that, what you're doing is wrong, we're so much better than you. No, please do not think that's what we're doing here.
All right, guys, thank you for watching and for sticking with us. We hope and pray that this gave you some encouragement to stand up for what's right and to just be willing to be rejected. This is Nate and Sutton sowing seeds of truth, love, and inspiration one view at a time.
And that was standing up for what's right.